Welcome, I'm James A. Zimohan. You're watching A News. Let's see your headlines. US-Iran ceasefire crumbles as fresh strikes rock Middle East. The funeral of former Iranian leader Khamenei concludes amid uncertainty over US talks. And at least 28 people have been killed after a devastating fire swept through a shoe factory in eastern China. A future peace between the US and Iran remains in doubt following an exchange in attacks from both sides in the Gulf region. The United Nations has warned the renewed violence could further destabilize the region. Here's more.
The United Nations is urging for restored calm between the US and Iran following a breakdown in their agreed ceasefire. The US said it struck around 90 military targets Wednesday night, including some near the Strait of Hormuz. Iran said at least 14 people were killed and 78 injured across 5 provinces. State media also reported strikes near the Bushehr nuclear power plant, although the United States has not commented on those claims. In response, Iran launched attacks targeting US military assets in Kuwait, Bahrain and Qatar. Iranian state-linked media later reported further strikes on sites in Kuwait, Jordan and Iraq. Iran's foreign ministry strongly condemned the latest US attacks, calling them a grave war crime, accusing Washington of dangerous actions. It also said bridges and a railway line linking Tehran to Mashhad, where the former supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei has been buried, were damaged during the strikes. The United Nations has expressed deep concern over the renewed violence in and around Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, warning that the latest escalation risks further destabilizing an already volatile region.
This tit-for-tat needs to stop, right? A return to diplomacy is urgently needed for the sake of stability in the region, for the sake of global stability. I mean, we keep talking about the impact that this conflict is having on the global economy, and I think all of the parties involved need to understand that the best way to end this conflict is a return to the negotiating table.
While the ceasefire appears to be broken, Pakistan's lead negotiator is working to bring both sides back to the table.
Now, the conflict between the United States and Iran has entered a dangerous new phase, with strikes extending beyond Iranian territory and fresh concerns over security in the Gulf. As tensions spread across the region, questions are growing about whether the conflict can be contained. Join us now is Matthew Breiser, former U.S. diplomat, joining us from Istanbul, Turkey. Good to have you, sir. Now, has this stopped being a U.S.-Iran conflict and become a wider Gulf security crisis?
It's the same conflict as we've seen since President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel decided to attack Iran. It is an example of the United States not being entirely clear on what its political objectives are, and having not foreseen what Iran said that it would do from the very beginning, which was, if attacked, it would spread the conflict throughout the Gulf and hit U.S. military facilities and other things in the countries of the Gulf that house U.S. military bases. So we're seeing a continuation of that exact form of conflict, with the exception having been nearly a month ago or so when the Memorandum of Understanding was concluded or was signed between the presidents of the United States and Iran. That Memorandum of Understanding had some vague wording, including on control of the Strait of Hormuz, which left the Iranian side to be able to interpret it as saying, well, we, the Iranian side, are able to control maritime movement through the Strait of Hormuz, and left the United States side arguing, no, Iran is not able to control maritime movements through the Strait of Hormuz. And so that's the crux of the matter right now. It's the same conflict, the same parameters, and now the same Memorandum of Understanding, but with its interpretation being interpreted differently by Iran versus the United States.
Mm-hmm. Now, why has Iran chosen to widen the battlefield rather than keep its response focused on the United States?
Well, because as what I was saying in the beginning, that Iran's policy has long been declared to be that if it is attacked by the United States, Iran will strike the countries that house U.S. military assets. And that's exactly what Iran has been doing.
All right. Now, countries like Bahrain, Kuwait, and Qatar never wanted to become part of this conflict. How difficult will it be for them to stay away from it now?
Well, they've been drawn in. They clearly don't want to continue to be attacked by Iran. Some of them, Kuwait, Bahrain, as you mentioned, Qatar, they have limited abilities to strike back at Iran. UAE, and then if Saudi Arabia is struck, though it doesn't seem to have been in this latest round, but if it is struck, those countries do have significant capabilities to strike back at Iran, but clearly they don't want to. They're furious that Iran has struck them. They, I think, rightfully recognize or proclaim these attacks by Iran as violations of international law, regardless of whether Iran threatened to attack them if the U.S. attacked Iran. But I don't think that they have an appetite or a significant capability to conduct a sustained military campaign against Iran that could have an impact in ending the conflict.
Now, let's talk about the Strait of Hormuz. Is it still Iran's strongest source of leverage, or is it become its biggest strategic risk?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think the Strait of Hormuz has become Iran's greatest source of leverage. And some members of Iran's negotiating delegation have said that the control over the Strait of Hormuz is a more potent and more effective geopolitical tool or weapon than an atomic bomb. And I actually agree with that assessment, because an atomic bomb is unusable. If you use the atomic bomb, you as a country, you as a regime will probably face your own extermination. But closing or restricting transit through the Strait of Hormuz is something that Iran can use over and over again, that has an immediate impact on global markets, which then means an impact on the United States, and which, as we're seeing, the United States has great difficulty preventing through military attacks. So I think what's going to happen is Iran will continue to exploit the ambiguity in the MOU that I mentioned already, and will say, we interpret the MOU to say we have the right to regulate traffic through the Strait of Hormuz, just as Turkey does with regard to the Turkish Straits. You know, under the Treaty of Lausanne, Turkey has negotiated, I should say, the right to be able to regulate and collect fees for providing services to maintain safety and sanitary controls in lighthouse operations through the Bosporus and the Dardanelles. And I think ultimately that's what Iran is going to demand and will negotiate. And I would guess probably in the end will negotiate that successfully with the United States.
Now, what would worry regional leaders more today? Another missile strike or prolonged disruption to energy exports?
I don't think missile strikes are very significant. Of course, if the missiles are able to penetrate the air defenses and then hit targets, okay, that's significant. But Iran is clearly not capable of sustaining military missile strikes that can create sustained damage over time. But the closing of the Strait of Hormuz, that is something that can create enormous economic disruption around the globe, and something that Iran can maintain indefinitely. So I think it's the latter. It's the restriction on maritime traffic through the Strait of Hormuz that is the biggest worry for all the countries of the world.
Now, in your opinion, who has the greatest ability to calm this crisis right now?
Among whom? Do you mean the combatants, or do you mean outside mediators?
Yes, exactly, outside mediators.
Well, mediators, as I know from having been a mediator, both between Armenia and Azerbaijan and between Russia and Georgia, as well as the Cypriot parties, mediators are simply even less than referees. Like a referee, they can decide when one side or the other has violated what has been agreed. But if nothing has been clearly agreed, then all the mediators can do is to try to help the parties find common ground. What we have here is a situation where, again, as I said before, the interpretation of the MOU signed by President Pezeshkian and President Trump is different in Tehran versus Washington. And that's because the wording of that memorandum of understanding was left vague. And I think that was because both parties realized they wanted an MOU. They wanted to show the world that military confrontation was reducing, but they couldn't agree yet on the fundamental terms of the MOU. So when it comes to the Strait of Hormuz, I think what mediators can do is pass proposals up and back between the Iranian side and the U.S. side and try to be creative, as we did in the OSCE Minsk group, to help the leaders of each country find compromises. But if the country's leaders aren't ready for compromise, for real compromise, then there's nothing the mediators can do. The good news, though, in this case is I think both the Iranian side and the U.S. side realize they're going to have to come up with a compromise. In this case, as we're focused on the Strait of Hormuz, but what the terms will be are not yet clear because Iran is pushing for as strong of an advantage as it can get in those negotiations by right now restricting transit through the Strait of Hormuz, and the U.S. is trying to deny Iran that leverage by targeting Iran's coastal attack capabilities.
That was Matthew Breiser, former U.S. diplomat, joining us from Istanbul, Turkey. Thank you for your time, sir.
Thank you. Pleasure to be with you.
Now, the remains of Iran's former supreme leader, Ayatollah Said Ali Khamenei, and members of his family have been laid to rest in the former leader's hometown of Mashhad. Turaj Shiralilu has more from the city.
The late supreme leader of Iran and 3 of his family members have finally been laid to rest. The burial took place early Friday after week-long state and public funeral processions in the capital Tehran, the city of Qom, and the Iraqi cities of Najaf and Karbala, home to the shrines of Shiite saints. The ceremony had been delayed for more than 4 months because of the Israeli-US war with Iran. Aside from serving as a political figurehead, Iran's late supreme leader was a grand Ayatollah, a top religious status in Shia Islam for someone who reached the highest level of scholarship in Islamic law. Following the Islamic Revolution in 1979, Ayatollah Khamenei led Iran for about 4 decades, shaping its domestic and foreign policies longer than any other political figure of his generation. His massive funeral rituals were seen as a tribute to his legacy, as well as a demonstration of post-war political resilience. Following his death, the leadership was passed to his son, Ayatollah Sayyid Mojtaba Khamenei. Because of the extensive funeral processions, Tehran and Washington postponed their technical level talks on implementing the ceasefire agreement that was signed last month. Now, the future of those talks remains in doubt following an exchange of attacks between the 2 sides in recent days. Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi has held phone calls with his counterparts from Oman, Pakistan, and Qatar, as well as foreign ministers of Turkey and Saudi Arabia. He also talked on phone with Pakistan's army chief, who led the negotiations that led to an initial ceasefire, focusing on de-escalating the latest tensions and resuming talks between the US and Iran. Turaj Shiralilu from Mashhad for A News.
We'll continue with the main stories of the day after a short break. Stay with us.
Attention is focused on Ankara. NATO leaders have gathered here for a major summit that could shape the future of transatlantic security.
This summit has shown that the alliance is stronger than ever. An alliance that is united and ready to defend every inch of our territory.
The decisions taken during these meetings carry global significance.
We just concluded a very successful NATO summit here in Turkey, and I want to thank President Erdogan, who's really a great man. He's a great leader.
From new defense initiatives to the preparations behind the scenes, Ankara has become the center of international attention.
Muhteşemdi dediler. Hatta bazıları biz Yeniçerilerinizi tanırız dediler.
our special report takes you behind the scenes of this major event, exploring the preparations, key decisions, and the main highlights of the meetings behind under the theme Key to Peace.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Now, Ukraine has targeted Russia's oil infrastructure in fresh strikes as refinery disruptions add pressure to the country's domestic fuel market. Ukrainian drones struck an oil refinery in southern Russia overnight, reportedly causing a fire at the facility. The refinery processes around 138,000 barrels of oil per day and has been targeted several times during the war. The strike comes as several Russian regions face fuel shortages, rising prices, and long queues at petrol stations. Moscow has temporarily banned diesel exports to redirect more supplies to the domestic market. Now, Germany has agreed to buy US-made Tomahawk cruise missiles and deploy them on its own territory, Chancellor Friedrich Merz has announced. Speaking in Parliament on Thursday, Merz said the agreement was reached with Washington during the NATO summit in Ankara. He added that the move would strengthen Germany's defenses while Europe develops its own long-range missile systems. The plan had been uncertain after President Trump announced a reduction in the US military presence in Germany. Now attention is turning to France's 2027 presidential race after a major development involving one of the country's leading far-right political figures. Here's Anita Sharma with the latest.
Welcome to This Day in Europe, where Marine Le Pen is back in France's presidential race and back on top of the polls. Just days after an appeals court upheld her conviction for embezzling European Parliament funds, but dramatically shortening her ban from holding office, new surveys show the National Rally leader leading the field for France's 2027 presidential election. The three polls put Le Pen at around 36% in the first round, with projections showing she would narrowly defeat either former Prime Minister Edouard Philippe or centrist Gabriel Attal in a runoff. Hard left leader Jean-Luc Mélenchon would lose by a wide margin to Le Pen. It's a remarkable turnaround for a politician whose presidential ambitions appeared to be in serious doubt just days ago. The election would be Le Pen's fourth bid for the French presidency after unsuccessful campaigns in 2012, 2017, and 2022. This time, however, President Emmanuel Macron cannot run again because of term limits, leaving France's political center without an incumbent standard-bearer. Le Pen has cast her legal battle as proof she's taking on what she calls the political establishment, telling supporters, "These trials, I believe, have strengthened us." Now, although free pending her final appeal, Le Pen could still end up serving a year under electronic monitoring wearing an ankle tag. However, her path to the Élysée will also depend on her long-standing partnership with party president Jordan Bardella. During the months when Le Pen faced the prospect of being barred from the race, he emerged as the party's potential presidential candidate. Now, the pair are campaigning together again, combining Le Pen's experience with Bardella's popularity among younger voters as the party seeks to broaden its appeal. Her hardline message remains very central. In a post on X, Le Pen stated that in 1 year, we will regain control over immigration and criminal policy. France's highest court is still expected to rule on Le Pen's final appeal before voters go to the polls, so a lot can happen before April. After surviving the biggest legal challenge of her career, Le Pen will now try to achieve what has eluded her 3 times before, winning the French presidency. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Now, parts of France's Loire River have dried up, leaving stretches of sandbanks as an intense heat wave grips the country. French weather officials have placed 9 departments in the Loire Valley and western France under the highest red heat alert, with much of the rest of the country under orange alerts. Temperatures are expected to reach 41 degrees Celsius on Friday. The extreme conditions come just days after wildfires in the southern region of France forced around 10,000 people to leave their homes. Now, still in Europe, Spain is battling multiple wildfires in its southern region, with the deadly blaze prompting an emergency response and military deployment in Almeria province. At least 11 people were killed near Beda, some inside vehicles engulfed by flames, as 150 military emergency personnel joined firefighting efforts. Heavy smoke forced road closures, while authorities raised the regional wildfire response plan to the emergency phase. Now, Beijing has issued an orange rainstorm alert as moistures from Super Typhoon Bavi, potentially the most powerful storm to hit China in years, moves northward. The warning comes as parts of the country are still cleaning up from deadly flooding that has already claimed dozens of lives this week. Manu Magdum has more from Beijing.
The Beijing Meteorological Observatory has issued an orange rainstorm alert, warning of heavy to torrential rainfall across the capital from Friday through the weekend. Authorities issued the highest level heavy rain alerts for 6 of Beijing's 16 districts. Up to 150 millimeters of rain within 6 hours in some areas is forecast. Districts including Miyun and Fangshan have shut down schools and cancelled outdoor activities, asking the public to stay indoors. Residents have been advised to avoid unnecessary travel, stay away from rivers and steep slopes, and monitor official weather updates. Bavi is forecast to make landfall on Saturday evening in Fujian province. Forecasters have warned that whichever track the storm takes after the landfall, authorities need to be especially vigilant against secondary disasters such as flash floods, mudslides, and transport disruptions. The warning comes as the death toll from devastating floods in southern China's Guangxi region rose to 39, with 9 people still missing. With Bavi now bearing down on the east coast, authorities are bracing for further severe weather across multiple regions simultaneously. China's weather warning system runs on 4 levels: blue, yellow, orange, and red. Orange indicates a serious risk requiring immediate precautionary action. Manu Mathun, A News, Beijing.
Over in China, at least 28 people have been killed in a fire at a shoe factory in southeastern part of the country after flames spread through the building, trapping workers on the rooftop. The fire broke out at a shoe factory with 239 people inside. Officials say 213 were evacuated, while 26 were found dead and 2 others died in hospital. Investigators say the blaze started on the ground floor, where flammable materials and adhesives were stored. Several company officials have been detained and the factory's bank accounts frozen. Jingyang produced more than 1.2 billion pairs of shoes in 2024, about 20% of global output. All right, after the break, we'll continue with the main stories shaping the region. Stay with us.
More than 20,000 partisan fighters have been hidden. We found only 3,000.
My grandmother had 3 brothers. In the graveyard, the body of just one of them.
Their struggle was very unequal and against a state that had defeated such a force as Nazi Germany.
lot of resistant fighters in the beginning of Soviet occupation actually would end up here, if not killed somewhere in the woods.
She was arrested at her home. Her 7-year-old daughter ran to her and screamed, "Mom, please take me with you." This record having the names of the individuals who were placed in the list of deportations.
I was born in Kengia, in a labor camp. My mother was a partisan liaison.
The first years were extremely difficult, of course. Poverty, hunger. The temperature sometimes dropped to minus 50 degrees.
The train stations, like the one behind me, once said goodbyes to thousands of people carried from across the Baltic states towards Siberia.
Welcome back to A News. Now, Israel's vote on the recognition of the so-called Armenian genocide has caused diplomatic tension with Azerbaijan, a key strategic partner, while yielding no clear benefit and drawing criticism from multiple sides.
Israel's government has formally recognized the Armenian genocide, a decision that has quickly created friction with its close ally, Azerbaijan. The move, announced by Foreign Minister Gideon Sa'ar, has surprised many observers and is now expected to go before the Knesset for approval. The decision has damaged Israel's relations with Azerbaijan, a country with which it has enjoyed close strategic ties for many years. Officials in Baku view the move as crossing a red line. Foreign Minister Sa'ar reportedly spoke with his Azerbaijani counterpart only after the decision had been made public, making it a fait accompli rather than the result of diplomatic dialogue.
From Azerbaijan's perspective, Israel's recognition of the Armenian genocide is not simply a symbolic issue. It carries broader political implication and has increased concerns in Baku about the direction of bilateral relations. If relations were ever to reach a point where Azerbaijan felt compelled to choose between its strategic partnership with Israel and its alliance with Turkey, it's widely understood that Azerbaijan would stand with Turkey. At present, however, the Azerbaijani government hopes such a choice will not become necessary and that both the partnership with Israel and the alliance with Turkey can be maintained.
Armenia itself also did not welcome the gesture. Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan criticized Israel's recognition, calling it cynical and contradictory. The decision comes at a sensitive time, as Azerbaijan and Armenia work towards a final peace agreement. The recognition is also seen as potentially serving the interests of Russia and Iran, both of which are wary of closer ties between Azerbaijan and Israel. For Turkey, the decision is largely irrelevant. The issue has lost much of its significance following recognition by the US, and the gesture is likely to have little practical impact on Ankara. The timing of the announcement, with Israeli elections approaching this autumn, suggests it was driven by domestic political considerations rather than strategic gain. With relations already strained with many countries, recognizing a historical tragedy may be seen as a way of generating a strong emotional response among voters. However, the move offers no clear diplomatic dividend for Israel and appears to have been a hasty decision carrying unnecessary costs.
Now, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has renewed Turkey's call to revive its European Union membership bid during talks with senior EU leaders in Ankara. Erdogan met with European Council President Antonio Costa and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen on the sidelines of the NATO summit. The talks focused on Turkey-EU relations, regional security, and Ankara's membership bid. Erdogan said Turkey has become a key production hub for Europe and highlighted its role in regional security and diplomacy, including the wars in Ukraine and Gaza, the US-Iran conflict, and Lebanon. Now, joining us to unpack this is Togrul Hasanzadeh from European University, European Studies Specialist, joining us from Berlin, Germany. Good to have you. Now, has Europe finally accepted that its future security also depends on what happens beyond its eastern borders?
Hello. So, in my view, the meeting between the European Union leaders and President Erdogan in Ankara comes at very sensitive moment for both sides. For sure, for the European Union, importance of Turkey was very high since the refugee waves came to the Europe in 2015. But it takes some time to Europe to accept that, accept Turkey as a high importance partner. But since in 2022 the war between Russia and Ukraine started, the importance of Turkey rose rapidly. So, of course, also impact had the changes in the Middle East, in Syria, tensions between the United States and Iran, and the situation in Gaza Strait. Of course, Turkey is a long-standing member, not member, but candidate for the European Union, and still waits for acceptance there. So now it's a high time to start negotiations between European Union and Turkey, and now is a right time. It's not late, but correct time to take further steps.
Now, if the Black Sea is becoming Europe's eastern gateway, where does Turkey fit into that picture?
Turkey is one of the powerful countries on the coastline of the Black Sea. It's a main actor in the Black Sea. Especially, we can observe that how the powers changed in this region after Ukraine and Russian war started. Turkey plays an important role in the security of this region. Controls also the Straits, Bosphorus and Dardanelles. That's why Turkey has influence in the defense, in the security, in the energy sector, and also ecological, which is also for the European Union also important. I'm pretty sure that all these topics in security, energy, and economy and ecology will be one of the main topics between European Union and Turkey.
Now, could this give Turkey a greater influence in shaping Europe's regional priorities?
Of course, especially in last 5 up to 10 years, Turkey's role rose in this region, and again, as a regime after regime change in Syria, after the breakout of the war in Ukraine, the interest of the European Union into the region rose. For European Union, it's also important to have a reliable partner, which Turkey is in this region, powerful and reliable partner. That's why Turkey will, in next years, will take more responsibilities, more main roles in our Black Sea, Caspian region. It's also important for Azerbaijan, for South Caucasian region, because European Union sees also Black Sea region, especially Turkey, as a link to the South Caucasus, to the Central Asia, and further to the China.
Now, I was going to ask you something you just mentioned. Could closer EU-Turkey cooperation create new opportunities for Azerbaijan?
Of course, as a main ally of Azerbaijan, Turkey's success and rising importance gives Azerbaijan more opportunities, more possibilities to develop relations with the European Union, and especially in the fields of energy sector and transport sector. We have to remember about Middle Corridor, which is one of the main projects of our days nowadays, and that will, of course, in upcoming years, change our region in a positive way, of course.
Now, does this strategy strengthen existing transport corridors? You just mentioned the Middle Corridor, or create entirely new ones?
For sure, this is more broader perspective how we will develop this region to the railways, to the sea links, and so on. This is not only about the transport. This is also integration for the European Union. It's also important that they can invest in this region and take more steps to deepen this, I would say, influence and cooperation in this region. So for the European Union, this region will play more importance already now.
Now, in your opinion, what's the biggest obstacle to turning this vision into reality?
Well, it's a tough question in sense of you need to negotiate, and of course there are some issues between Turkey and European Union. I would say trust, first of all. Both sides have to strengthen the trust in each other, how to negotiate and be more open. I would say that first steps will be in the field of how to negotiate, which instrument to use, how to integrate. Turkey's goal is to be a member of the European Union, but we know that some states within the European Union, for example, France, does not really want to see Turkey within the European Union. So I think that such moments are some problems which has to be solved between Turkey and European Union to go further.
Now, finally, how significant is integration between the regional players in ensuring that this project and this plan becomes a reality?
Well, after the Karabakh War and after the regime change in Syria, the main players, I would say EU, Turkey, and of course Azerbaijan, has shown interest into peace building in the region, and we took in last years a few main steps to build trust, to build cooperation, and to make a basis for perspectives. So now we have to deepen these connections between EU and Azerbaijan, and of course EU and Turkey. This has to be more collective play with Turkey and Azerbaijan. I'm pretty sure that Turkey and Azerbaijan can coordinate their steps in these projects, in this policy, and of course Azerbaijan has no interest to be a part of the European Union, but regional integration of all three states in South Caucasus, Georgia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, will have a positive influence in this region and will make this economical, cultural, energetical integration in this region more possible with help and support of European Union and Turkey. These are big, I would say, actors in this region, European Union and Turkey.
All right, that was Togul Hassanzadeh, European Studies Specialist, joining us from Berlin, Germany. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Now, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says he expects tangible progress in Turkey's defense ties with the United States after his meeting with President Donald Trump at this week's NATO summit. The comments come amid growing optimism that long-standing disputes over sanctions and fighter aircraft could soon be resolved. Adam Moro reports from Istanbul.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan says he expects his meeting with U.S. President Donald Trump to deliver concrete results for Turkey's defense industry, especially on Ankara's domestically developed Khan fighter aircraft and its ongoing bid to rejoin the U.S.-led F-35 fighter jet program. Speaking Thursday, Erdogan described his bilateral meeting with Trump during this week's NATO summit in Ankara as constructive, saying he believed the discussions would lead to a positive outcome. The meeting marked the highest-level engagement between the two leaders since Trump returned to office early last year, with defense cooperation emerging as a key item on the agenda. At the summit, Trump signaled that Washington was prepared to lift sanctions imposed on Turkey's defense sector under the Countering America's Adversaries Through Sanctions Act, or CAATSA. The sanctions were imposed in 2020 after Turkey acquired the Russian-made S-400 air defense system, prompting the United States to remove Ankara from the multinational F-35 program and restrict cooperation with Turkey's defense industry. Since then, Ankara has repeatedly argued that the sanctions were unjustified and has sought their removal while also calling for Turkey's readmittance to the F-35 program. Despite these obstacles, Turkey has stepped up development of its domestic defense industry, with the fifth-generation Khan fighter jet becoming one of its flagship projects. Erdogan's latest remarks suggest that both sides may now be seeking to reset relations, especially in the defense industrial field, after several years of tension. While no formal agreements have yet been announced, both Turkish and U.S. officials have signaled a willingness to deepen cooperation, raising hopes that this week's summit in Ankara could mark a new chapter in defense ties between the two NATO allies. This is Adam Moro for A News in Istanbul, Turkey.
Now, Pakistan and Qatar are trying to keep diplomacy alive after renewed fighting between the United States and Iran threatened a fragile peace process. Islamabad says dialogue remains the only way forward. Miriam Zia reports from Islamabad.
Pakistan is stepping up diplomatic efforts to keep the United States and Iran at the negotiating table. On Wednesday, Pakistan's Foreign Ministry expressed deep concern over the renewed violence this week. It urged all parties to exercise restraint. The minister said there is no alternative to continued engagement, dialogue, and diplomacy. It also called on both sides to honor their commitments under the Islamabad Memorandum of Understanding. Pakistan says it remains ready to support efforts to reduce tensions. By Thursday, Pakistan and Qatar were continuing diplomatic contacts with both Washington and Tehran. The aim is to prevent ceasefire framework from collapsing and bring both sides back to negotiations. Talks remains focused on unresolved issues including maritime security, sanctions relief, and implementation of the deal. The latest escalation has increased pressure on the mediation effort, but neither side has formally withdrawn from the agreement. That leaves space for diplomacy, even as Pakistan and Qatar work to keep the peace process alive. Mariam Zia, A News, Islamabad.
Now, the fourth Shusha Global Media Forum, taking place on the 13th and 14th of July, will bring together media leaders from around the world to discuss the role of journalism in promoting peace and rebuilding trust. Here's the story.
Each year, media leaders, policymakers and experts come together in Shusha, a city in Azerbaijan's Karabakh region, a cultural capital, and now a platform for a global conversation on media, trust and the future. But why? Why does a media forum matter in a world that already has more information than ever? Because the real problem is no longer access, it is trust. That is the forum's purpose, to bring media voices, officials and experts together to examine how journalism responds to a changing world. One of the forum's central moments is a direct exchange with Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev, where participants raise questions on media freedom, regional politics and global affairs. Over 3 hours of questions and answers delivered in 4 languages.
Media representatives, they have a special responsibility.
Beyond the headlines, A News has been embedded in the forum itself, not just covering it, but contributing to its coverage on the ground. But what is waiting for us this year? To find out, we need to trace the pattern. In the first forum, the question was, how does media adapt? In the second, the conversation shifted to, who controls the truth? In the third, it became, can journalism stay credible? Growing year by year, each edition has welcomed more participants from more countries. Now comes the fourth forum. From peacebuilding and reconstruction to media diplomacy, disinformation, AI ethics and cross-border dialogue, this year's agenda points to one question. Can media rebuild trust? That is the fourth layer, the future.
Now, Russia's fuel shortages are beginning to affect the country beyond its borders. Several Central Asian states that rely heavily on Russian fuel imports are already reporting supply disruptions and rising prices. Our correspondent Farza Kalamoziner looks at how the crisis is reshaping the region's energy security.
Russia's fuel shortages are beginning to spill beyond its borders, with the first signs of disruption now emerging across Central Asia. The crisis follows Ukrainian strikes that, according to Reuters, damaged more than a quarter of Russia's oil refining capacity. In response, Moscow imposed a ban on gasoline exports and is considering similar restrictions on diesel. While those measures officially exempt members of the Eurasian Economic Union, reduced refining capacity is making it increasingly difficult for Russia to supply foreign markets. According to industry estimates, the country is now facing a fuel shortfall of at least 20,000 tons a day, raising the prospect that it may need to import fuel for the first time in decades. The impact is already visible in Kyrgyzstan, which relies on Russia for more than 90% of its gasoline imports. Some filling stations have reported shortages of premium fuel, prompting the government to seek additional supplies from Azerbaijan, Kazakhstan, Belarus, Uzbekistan and Turkmenistan. Uzbekistan has so far avoided physical shortages, but not higher prices after fuel volumes on the country's commodity exchange fell sharply. Wholesale gasoline prices climbed to record levels, raising concerns that transport and food costs could also increase. In Tajikistan, where around 84% of fuel imports come from Russia, diesel shortages have already been reported. Some filling stations suspended sales, while others introduced purchase limits at the height of the agricultural season. Kazakhstan and Turkmenistan remain less exposed because of their own refining capacity. However, their ability to offset lower Russian supplies is limited. In Kazakhstan, Authorities are also stepping up efforts to curb fuel smuggling across the border in order to protect domestic supplies. Analysts say the current disruption is exposing the risks of relying on a single fuel supplier. Even if Russia's fuel shortages prove temporary, they believe the crisis could accelerate efforts across Central Asia to diversify fuel imports, with China seen as one of the region's most likely long-term alternatives. Fariza Kalimurzina, Almaty, E-News.
Now, experts from across the Commonwealth of Independent States and beyond have gathered in Uzbekistan's capital to discuss how Sharia-compliant finance can unlock new investment opportunities. The event comes as Tashkent develops its Islamic finance sector under a newly adopted legal framework. Our correspondent Sever Rajapova reports from Tashkent.
Tashkent is hosting the 5th CIS Islamic Banking and Finance Forum, bringing together policymakers, regulators, financial institutions and international experts. They will be discussing the future of Islamic finance across Central Asia and the Commonwealth of Independent States. Islamic finance continues to expand rapidly worldwide. The industry is now valued at more than $6 trillion and is growing by around 10 to 12% annually, with Islamic banking accounting for the largest share of assets. Driven by cross-border connectivity and environmental, social and governance sukuk, an Islamic type of bond, the industry is projected to surpass $10 trillion by 2031.
We are organizing CIS Islamic Finance Forums in Uzbekistan from last 5 years. And in the previous forums, we brought different international experts to the Uzbek market so that we can share the international experience with the people of Uzbekistan and other CIS nations.
The discussions come at a pivotal moment for Uzbekistan. Earlier this year, the country introduced its first comprehensive legal framework for Islamic banking, paving the way for Islamic banks and Islamic banking windows to operate under national legislation. Islamic finance follows Sharia principles, prohibiting interest-based lending, and instead relying on partnership-based financing, trade finance and leasing models such as Murabaha and Ijara. The central bank has already adopted regulations allowing microfinance institutions to offer Islamic finance services, while legislation on full-scale Islamic banking continues to advance.
Experts telling that probably at least $3 billion every year. This is the potential of market for Islamic finance in Uzbekistan.
Throughout the forum, experts are also discussing sukuk markets, Islamic fintech, digital banking, takaful insurance, and cross-border investment, as demand for ethical financial products continues to grow across the region. With approximately 94% of Uzbekistan's population identified as Muslims, and with the growth of interest from investors in the Gulf and Southwest Asia, officials believe Uzbekistan has the potential to become a regional hub for Islamic finance. It is Yuri Rajab reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan News.
All right, and now to sports. Azerbaijan's Karabakh Football Club have taken the first step in their Europa League qualifying campaign with a home win against Icelandic side Vestri. Katie Wilson has more from Tofik Bayramov Stadium in Baku.
The crowds have cleared here at Tofik Bayramov Stadium. 16,000 tickets were sold for this game. This stadium was packed just minutes ago, and now it is empty after the final whistle blew and Karabakh gave us a convincing 3-0 victory over the Icelandic side, Vestri. Now that makes the 3,000-mile journey that Karabakh are going to take next week to get to Reykjavik somewhat of a formality. And you know what? It might be 3-0 on the scoreboard, but there were plenty more chances that Karabakh had. The entire game, most if not all of the game, was played in Vestri's half. It was very much a convincing victory from Karabakh. They dominated, and it was an opportunity for us to see some of the new signings that Karabakh have made. They very much stood out. Take a look out for number 5, the Mozambican. I think he could be one to watch. So it was interesting to see that synergy develop. And then, of course, we had the returning players like Yankovic, like Zubir doing what they do best. So it's great to be back here at Tofik Baramov Stadium. We've been speaking to someone else who hopes to be back to this stadium very soon. But for now, I think we can confidently say that Karabakh will be making it to the second qualifying round of the Europa League. So what were your observations from the game?
I think it was a good performance for the first round. There are still some adaptation issues within the team, which is normal, but overall they played very well, and we want to continue performing like this. Our goal is to qualify for the UEFA Europa League group stage.
This time we saw the new signings to the team also. How did you find them?
I think their performance was good, but I still need a little more time to fully come back to the team. Once that process is complete, I believe I'll be able to contribute even more.
It's still nothing over for this round. We need to now rest and prepare for a rematch, but 3-0 is a good start for us, yeah.
The atmosphere in the stadium was very good. We were expecting this from the fans, and it went the way we wanted. I feel very good. When nights are going like this, you can only feel good, you know. The team played very well, and the stadium, the atmosphere was top. So as a player, is the only thing we want.
All right, that's all we have for now. Thank you for watching. Stay tuned to A News.